No one is coming, but you're stronger than you think. Close your eyes and let's drift back to that quiet moment when you realized no one was going to fix your life for you. Maybe it hit you in the shower or during a 2 a.m. scroll through everyone else's highlight reels. The truth settled in like cold water. You're on your own. And weirdly, that's the good part. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie there, tracing thoughts like constellations. How often you've waited for a sign, a rescue, a mentor who never quite materialized. It's funny how childhood stories convince you that someone will appear right before the credits roll. But adulthood is the quiet realization that you are the cavalry. Scientists still argue whether human resilience is born from genetics or cultivated through experience. But either way, you've got it pulsing beneath your ribs. You probably don't feel powerful. You probably feel tired. Power, though, often wears the costume of fatigue. It's the moment you drag yourself out of bed even when the world hasn't clapped for you in months. That's not weakness. That's evolution in slow motion. Here's a mainstream fact to anchor you. Your brain literally rewires itself through effort. Neuroplasticity, the science of change, is your built-in upgrade system. The more you act like the person you wish you were, the more your neurons believe it. But there's a fringe twist scientists play with. Some researchers toy with the idea that consciousness itself reshapes the body, that thoughts can alter DNA expression. They still debate that one in dim university halls, half believing, half afraid it might be true. You shift under the blanket, feeling how responsibility weighs differently than fear. When you accept that no one's coming, the silence stops sounding like abandonment and starts sounding like permission. Permission to build your own map, to stop waiting for applause, to make breakfast the way you like it, to fail loudly and still show up. Think of all the small acts of survival you never credited yourself for. Every heartbreak you patched with laughter, every rent payment that felt impossible but happened anyway. You've already been saving yourself, quietly, repeatedly. You just never gave it a name. You remember that whisper about stardust? It applies here. The atoms inside you were forged in collapsed suns that didn't wait for help either. They burned until they became something else entirely. You carry their stubborn brilliance. If you listen closely, you can almost hear your own heartbeat sinking with that cosmic defiance. There's no knight, no fairy godparent, no deus ex machina. There's only you, and the small, soft promise that you're enough to keep going. So tonight, while the world hums beyond your window, imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a dark forest. There's no guide, no light, just your pulse and the faint glow of determination. You step forward anyway. One step, then another. The path doesn't appear until your feet meet it. That's how all beginnings happen, terrifying, unceremonious, entirely yours. The brutal truth, no one is coming to save you. The beautiful truth, they don't need to. You already have everything required to build a life worth waking up for. And in that realization, in that tiny, almost invisible moment of surrender, you become unstoppable, even as you drift toward sleep. Everyone's too busy hurting to notice yours. The misattribution of empathy, how we expect others to feel our pain. You've probably been there, sending out invisible distress signals, hoping someone will read the subtext in your silence. But most people are tuned to their own static, their own quiet ache. The truth isn't that they don't care. It's that they're carrying too much themselves to notice yours clearly. You lie back, the ceiling a soft blur, and think about how much of life is people accidentally wounding each other while trying to heal themselves. Scientists still argue whether humans are inherently selfish or just neurologically limited. Our empathy circuits can only handle so many fires before we start guarding our own oxygen. Mainstream psychology calls it compassion fatigue, and it's spreading faster than most people realize. You post something vague, just a hint of sadness, and the world scrolls past. But the barista who smiled at you that morning, she's thinking about her rent. The friend who didn't text back, he's wrestling with a breakup no one knows about. The truth hurts. Not everyone ignoring you is cruel. Most of them are just trying to make it through their own storm. There's a quirky tidbit for you. In Japan, there's a word, tsundoku, for the habit of collecting books you'll never read. Maybe we collect emotional weights the same way. Everyone hoards unspoken feelings until their shelves sag under the pressure. Some pretend theirs are alphabetized and tidy. Others just stop inviting people to see the mess. You breathe slowly. You remember that one person who seemed to get it, who mirrored your pain like it was theirs. Maybe they drifted away, maybe they didn't. But empathy isn't a lifelong contract. It's a moment of overlap between two storms. When it happens, it's magic. When it fades, it's just human nature returning to equilibrium. The ceiling fan spins like a hypnotic metronome. You start to see it, the quiet universality of struggle. Every face on the train, every stranger in a grocery aisle, carrying invisible bruises. You're not alone. You're just surrounded by people too busy hiding the same ache. There's a scientific debate about mirror neurons, the cells in your brain that supposedly let you feel what others feel. Some researchers say they're the root of compassion. Others argue they're overhyped, that empathy comes from storytelling, not biology. Either way, your brain tries. It reaches out through imagination, painting emotion across other people's faces like projection screens. And sometimes, when you expect someone to understand, it's not rejection when they don't, it's bandwidth. Emotional Wi-Fi has limited range. You think about that and smile softly. Maybe it's not your job to be understood by everyone. Maybe it's enough to understand yourself and offer others the grace you've been craving. Because here's the quiet trick. When you stop demanding empathy, you start creating space for it. Somewhere outside, a car passes. You imagine the driver's face, jaw tense, eyes half tired. Maybe they just left an argument. Maybe they're rehearsing an apology. You realize that every single person you've ever met is fighting a battle that barely fits inside their own skin. The brutal part of growing up is accepting that life isn't personal. It's crowded. The gentle part is choosing kindness anyway, even when it goes unnoticed. And maybe, as you drift towards sleep, you'll picture all those unseen souls out there, tiny lights flickering in windows, each one exhausted but still glowing faintly through their pain. You're one of them. You're part of the constellation. You're proof that hurt doesn't make you less human. It makes you part of the quiet majority of hearts still beating through the noise. So no, most people don't fully notice your pain, but they're not villains. They're just mirrors turned inward. The more you accept that, the lighter it becomes to carry what's yours, and the softer it feels to forgive what's theirs. You'll be forgotten sooner than you think. The illusion of permanence, how memory fades faster than you live it. You scroll past an old photo of someone you once swore you'd never forget. For For a second, you pause. Then your thumb keeps moving. That's how it happens. People vanish not in storms or funerals, but in fractions of seconds between one distraction and the next. You exhale, watching the thought drift through your mind like smoke. Scientists still argue whether memory is a storage system or a reconstruction machine. Each time you recall something, your brain slightly rewrites it, sanding the edges smooth, editing the colors. Mainstream neuroscience confirms it. Memory isn't a video recording, it's a remix. And one day, someone will remix you out of theirs without meaning to. There's something oddly comforting about that. Your name will be whispered for a while, typed in captions, maybe even carved on something shiny. Then time, patient and thorough, will erase the context. The earth itself has no archive. It just keeps spinning, indifferent and efficient. You probably never heard this, but in about 10 million years, the continents will shift again, and your city might not even exist. That's how small and miraculous your timeline really is. You might think this sounds depressing, but stay with it. It's not. There's freedom in knowing you don't have to live forever to matter. You just have to live. Legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about leaving warmth in the people who cross your orbit. A laugh that sticks, a phrase that echoes, a kindness that keeps someone else upright when they want to collapse. There's a quirky tidbit here. Scientists once calculated that if every human who ever lived were still remembered by name, we'd need hundreds of libraries the size of Earth to store those memories. Forgetting isn't failure, it's maintenance. The universe has limited hard drive space. You think about the people you've already lost to time. Not just the dead ones, but the faded ones. The best friend from middle school. The stranger who comforted you once in a hospital hallway. The teacher who made you feel smart. You can barely recall their voices, but they left fingerprints on the way you move through life. That's their afterlife, living inside your habits, your tone, your courage. Scientists still debate what happens to consciousness after death. Some argue it flickers out completely. Others believe it's energy, recycled like light through a prism. You don't need to solve that tonight. What matters is that right now, in this small and fleeting span, you exist. You breathe. You blink. You get to love and lose and laugh and mess up and try again. Maybe being forgotten isn't the tragedy you think it is. Maybe it's what allows the next generation to write their own stories without carrying the full weight of yours. The same way you outgrew the ghosts of those who came before, someone will eventually step over the quiet memory of you and keep walking. And that's okay. It means the world didn't stop spinning when you left it better than you found it. You breathe in again, slow and steady. The air feels different when you remember how temporary it all is. You start to savor things more. The texture of the blanket, the faint hum of your refrigerator, the pulse of your own wrist. You realize that being forgotten is the price of being alive. So don't build monuments. Build moments. Don't chase immortality. Chase presence. The universe doesn't keep score. It keeps rhythm. And tonight, your heartbeat is part of that rhythm, soft and small and beautifully impermanent. And when sleep finally finds you, it won't care about your resume, your followers, or your legacy. It'll just wrap around you quietly, reminding you that fading isn't defailing. It's how the light makes room for dawn. Happiness is weather, not climate. The science of fleeting joy. Why your brain treats happiness like sunlight. You wake up one morning and feel it. That strange, fizzy hum under your skin. Coffee tastes better. The air seems less rude. and for a few hours everything glows. Then, without warning, it fades. You check your messages, the news, your to-do list, and the warmth slips away like mist. That's happiness, transient, slippery, maddeningly inconsistent. Scientists still argue whether happiness is a chemical or a construct. The mainstream view ties it to dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, the holy trinity of feel good. But the fringe crowd insists it's not chemistry at all, just perception filtered through expectation. You can have the same day twice and label one good and the other awful, simply by how you narrate it. You probably never thought of it this way, but your brain's default mode isn't joy, it's survival. The ancestors who sat around smiling at sunsets didn't notice the tigers creeping up behind them. You inherited their caution, not their contentment. Happiness, then, isn't supposed to be permanent. It's a flash of reward for moments when danger feels far enough away. There's a quirky little study. Researchers found that lottery winners and accident survivors reported similar levels of happiness a year later. Turns out, your baseline mood resets like a thermostat. Win millions, lose mobility. Your mind eventually drifts back to normal. It's called hedonic adaptation, the cosmic joke that keeps humanity humble. You shift under the blanket, amused. Maybe chasing constant happiness is like trying to nail sunlight to the wall. It's not meant to stay. It's meant to remind you you're alive. You need contrast. The dull days make the bright ones sparkle. Without sorrow, joy has no definition. Without boredom, excitement has no kick. Scientists still debate whether true contentment comes from external change or internal acceptance. Stoics said it's about control. Limit your desires, and you limit your disappointments. Modern psychology nods along. Gratitude practices literally rewire the brain, thickening the grey matter that manages emotion regulation. So yes, keeping a journal might actually make you happier, but only until you forget to write in it. You can almost feel your mood shifting as you breathe. One moment, you're nostalgic. The next, you're tranquil. Then, randomly, a flicker of sadness wanders in, uninvited. And that's okay. You're a weather system, not a statue. Emotions move through you like fronts, warm, cold, unpredictable. Trying to stay happy forever would be like trying to stop the rain. There's comfort in that thought. It means nothing's wrong with you when joy comes and goes. You're not broken. You're cyclical. Your mind is just balancing the equation of existence. Sun, cloud, drizzle, repeat. You remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars flicker. Their brightness fluctuates as they burn fuel, and eventually they dim. Yet from light years away, they still look steady. Maybe that's what humans are like, brilliantly inconsistent up close, quietly radiant from a distance. So next time the happiness fades, don't chase it. Let it pass, the way you let wind slip through an open window. You'll feel it again, maybe in a smell, a song, a moment when you least expect it. And when it does return, it'll feel even warmer for having been gone. You pull the blanket up, the fan hums like soft ocean waves, and your mind drifts. Somewhere deep inside, your neurons flicker in gentle rhythm, tiny bursts of light that don't last forever, but are enough for now to glow. Because happiness was never meant to be a destination. It's the weather pattern that keeps you human, the rhythm that keeps you reaching, the gentle reminder that even fleeting light is still light. Stop explaining yourself to walls. The futility of understanding. Why some people will never hear you. You know that ache when you pour your heart into words and they bounce back like rubber bullets. You craft the perfect message, the calm explanation, the thoughtful text, and somehow it still spirals into misunderstanding. It's exhausting, isn't it? Like trying to teach color to someone who insists everything is gray. You sigh softly because you've done this before, maybe with a friend, a parent, a partner. You thought if you just said it right, they'd finally get it. But the truth is brutal. Some people are invested in misunderstanding you. Scientists still argue whether communication is more about transmission or interpretation, whether meaning lives in what's said or in what's heard. Spoiler, it's both, and that's why it's chaos. Mainstream psychology backs you up. Humans listen primarily to respond, not to understand. The average person starts formulating their reply within 3 seconds of you speaking. It's no wonder your point never lands. They're busy rehearsing their counterpoint while you're still mid-sentence. There's a quirky tidbit here. In one experiment, researchers played garbled recordings of sentences to participants. When told the meaning afterward, their brains automatically heard it clearly, as if it had always been obvious. That's communication bias in action. We only hear what fits our existing story. You turn slightly, blanket rustling, as you realize how much energy you've spent trying to earn comprehension from people who never intended to offer it. It's like yelling through glass. Your breath fogs up your own reflection, and the echo becomes your only audience. Scientists still debate the limits of empathy, whether it can truly cross the boundaries of upbringing, belief, or pain. Some say it's limited to shared experience. Others believe imagination can bridge the gap, but no study has ever found a cure for willful ignorance. You think of all the times you over-explained, justifying your emotions, diluting your truth so it wouldn't sound too much. You tried to make your pain palatable, your joy acceptable, your opinion soft-edged enough to keep the peace. But peace built on suppression is just a truce with self-betrayal. Here's the quiet lesson. You don't owe clarity to those committed to confusion. You don't need to translate your truth into every dialect of denial. Some people can't hear you, not because you're unclear, but because your frequency threatens their comfort. You shift again, the sheets cool against your skin, and feel a strange calm wash over you. Maybe the goal isn't to be understood by everyone. It's to stop explaining yourself to walls. Walls can't listen, but they do echo. Sometimes that echo becomes a lullaby for your own sanity. There's a gentle freedom in silence. When you stop over-explaining, you start conserving your power. You start noticing who listens without being prompted, who asks instead of assuming, who mirrors your vulnerability instead of exploiting it. Those are your people, the ones who don't need subtitles to understand your heart. Remember that whisper about stardust. Even stars don't explain their glow. They just burn until someone notices. You can do the same. So tonight, let the need for explanation fade with the hum of the fan. Picture your words floating up and dissolving into the air. Not wasted, just released. Some truths don't need to be heard to be real. They only need to be owned. You breathe out, the kind of exhale that feels like unclenching invisible fists. You're no longer pleading to be seen. You're quietly certain that you already exist. And in that stillness, the walls stop feeling like barriers. They start feeling like proof that your voice has weight. Love doesn't always mean staying. The paradox of devotion. Why letting go can be the most loving act. You remember that moment. You knew it was over, even as your heart refused to admit it. The silence between you stretched too long, like a radio station fading into static. You still cared, maybe even loved, but the connection was cracked in ways no apology could seal. That's the part they don't tell you. Sometimes love survives the breakup, quietly haunting both of you in different rooms. You pull the blanket closer, feeling that hollow ache that comes from missing someone who's still alive. Scientists still argue whether heartbreak activates physical pain receptors or emotional ones. But MRI scans show both light up the same way. Your brain, it seems, doesn't differentiate between a broken heart and a broken bone. Here's a mainstream fact. It takes, on average, about 11 weeks for people to emotionally recover from a breakup. But that's just numbers. Grief doesn't keep a calendar. Sometimes you move on in a month. Sometimes you carry their ghost for years, like lint you can't brush off your soul. There's a quirky tidbit too. In ancient Greece, there were 8 different words for love, ranging from passionate eros to selfless agape. We lump them all into one messy word now, which might explain why modern relationships collapse under the weight of mismatched definitions. You thought you were speaking the same language, but you were conjugating different verbs entirely. You shift on the pillow, half smiling at the irony. We treat love like ownership, but real love is closer to stewardship. You don't keep a person, you get to witness them for a while. Scientists still debate whether long-term attachment is a biological trick or an emotional evolution. Some call it the brain's way of conserving energy. Others call it spiritual fusion. Whatever it is, it hurts like fire when it ends. But maybe love isn't measured by how long it lasts. Maybe it's measured by what it awakens in you. The courage to feel deeply, to risk pain for connection, to see yourself reflected in another's eyes and not look away. Staying can be easy. Letting go gracefully. That's the advanced course. You think of the times you stayed too long, convincing yourself it was loyalty, when it was really fear. Fear of change, fear of loneliness, fear of being the one who left first. But love isn't a hostage situation. It's a dance. When the music stops, the kindest thing you can do is bow and step back. There's an open debate about whether true love ever dies. Some researchers point to emotional imprints, lingering patterns of neural activity that remain even after someone's gone. Others say those memories fade like any other, replaced by new ones. Maybe both are true. Love doesn't die. It transforms. It becomes the part of you that learned gentleness, empathy, or strength because of them. Remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars collapse, but in doing so, they scatter the elements that form new worlds. Maybe endings are like that. Cosmic recycling. Pain becomes wisdom. Absence becomes space for someone new, or maybe just for you. So tonight, as the air hums and the night stretches soft around you, let yourself feel it all. The nostalgia, the ache, the gratitude. You don't have to forget them to move on. You just have to stop orbiting a memory that no longer reflects the light back. And maybe, one quiet morning years from now, you'll think of them again, not with longing, but with peace. Because love didn't fail. It finished its lesson. You close your eyes, your heart heavier, but somehow steadier. Love doesn't always mean staying, but it always means growing. Kindness isn't always innocent. The camouflage of good intentions. Why not every gentle gesture is pure? You've met them, the charming helper, the sweet voice that seems to always know what's best for you. They text at the right times, say all the right things, and make you feel like you owe them a piece of your peace. But there's something off beneath the smile. Like a beautiful gift wrapped around a hook. You pull the blanket up, feeling that familiar twinge of guilt when you remember how easily you trusted someone who turned kindness into currency. Scientists still argue whether manipulation is learned behavior or instinctual survival strategy. Mainstream psychology calls it covert control, the art of giving in a way that keeps the receiver indebted. There's a quirky tidbit for you. In nature, even vampire bats share blood meals with others who've helped them before, but they track the debt meticulously. If one bat stops returning the favor, the others stop sharing. Kindness, it seems, isn't just moral. It's transactional, even in the dark. You think about the people who've weaponized generosity, the ones who say, "I was only trying to help," when what they really mean is, "You should have done it my way." They give you advice that feels more like a leash. They comfort you just long enough to stay relevant in your pain. And the hardest part? They often don't know they're doing it. Scientists still debate where altruism ends and ego begins. Some argue that pure selflessness doesn't exist, that every act of kindness has a shadow of self-satisfaction behind it. Others say empathy is evolution's crowning gift, proof that cooperation beats conquest. Maybe both are right. Maybe even the purest kindness still glows a little with self-interest. And maybe that's okay. You shift, letting that idea settle. The goal isn't to stop trusting. It's to learn discernment. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's bait. You're allowed to ask why someone's being nice. You're allowed to wonder if their warmth serves you or just soothes them. You remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars give off warmth, but get too close and they burn. Real kindness works the same way. It gives light without consuming you. The fake kind glows just long enough to keep you orbiting until you melt. There's a fact most people miss. Your gut, yes, your literal stomach, is lined with over 500 million neurons. Scientists call it the enteric nervous system. It reacts before your rational brain does. That uneasy feeling when someone's too nice? That's your gut doing the math your heart doesn't want to. You think about all the times you ignored that instinct, convincing yourself you were just being cynical. But there's a sacred kind of self-respect in saying no thank you, even to sweetness. Not all sugar is safe. Still, don't let this make you bitter. The world needs kind people. It just needs them grounded, not gullible. You can still offer compassion without letting it be mined. You can still forgive without reapplying for the same wound. Scientists still argue about moral psychology, whether goodness is a universal code or a social invention. Maybe it's both. But one thing's clear, kindness is meant to heal, not to harvest. So tonight, as you drift between thoughts, imagine every person you've met as a constellation. Some stars shine for beauty, some for navigation, and a few, sadly, for distraction. Your job isn't to dim them. It's to choose which light you follow. You exhale, feeling lighter. The lesson isn't that people are bad. It's that not all warmth is safe. And when you learn that difference, you stop confusing comfort for care. Effort isn't currency. Results are. The economics of achievement. Why trying hard isn't always enough. You've done it. You've poured your time, your nerves, your sleep into something, only to watch someone else breeze past you with half the sweat and twice the applause. It stings, doesn't it? Because we grow up believing that effort equals outcome, that diligence guarantees reward. But the world didn't sign that contract. You turn over, feeling that slow pulse of resentment that follows disappointment. Scientists still argue whether success depends more on talent, luck, or persistence. The mainstream camp praises grit. Angela Duckworth's buzzword for sustained effort over time. But the fringe thinkers whisper about the Matthew effect. Those who start with advantage tend to multiply it, leaving everyone else scrambling uphill. There's a quirky fact tucked in here. Olympic medalists report lower happiness when they win silver instead of bronze. Why? Because bronze compares downward, at least I placed, while silver compares upward, I almost had gold. The effort feels wasted, even when the result is objectively extraordinary. Perspective, it seems, weighs heavier than exertion. You sigh. You remember the teacher who said, "As long as you try your best." Sweet words. Terrible preparation for real life. The universe doesn't grade on participation. Try telling the rent office you gave it your all this month. Try telling gravity you really tried not to drop the glass. But here's the softer truth buried inside. Effort does matter. It just doesn't always pay in the currency you expect. Sometimes your reward isn't recognition, it's resilience. Sometimes your sweat becomes skill. Your failure becomes foundation. The result might not be applause. It might just be quiet competence, which the world rarely claps for, but always benefits from. Scientists still debate whether success correlates more with intelligence or consistency. The data leans toward the latter, but with a twist. Effort must be aimed. 10,000 misdirected hours don't make mastery. They just make exhaustion. You can't row faster if your boat's facing the wrong direction. You think of all the late nights, the unpaid favors, the times you went above and beyond for people who barely noticed. You wonder if maybe you were measuring value by visibility. The irony is that most of what truly matters, growth, peace, integrity, happens quietly without trophies. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. There's a growing academic debate about whether luck itself can be modeled mathematically. Some researchers simulate success by mixing random events with skill variables. And every time, luck wins by a small but decisive margin. It's humbling, isn't it? You could do everything right and still lose the coin toss. But maybe that's the beauty of it. If effort guaranteed success, life would be mechanical. The uncertainty, the chaos. That's where meaning lives. You strive, you stumble. You learn how to get back up. The result isn't the medal. It's the muscle memory of trying. You pull the blanket tighter. Your breathing sinking with the hum of the fan. Maybe tonight, the lesson isn't to stop trying, but to stop expecting fairness as payment. The world doesn't owe you equilibrium, but every time you choose to give your best anyway, you quietly cheat cynicism of its victory. Remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars collapse under their own effort before becoming something greater, a supernova. The explosion looks like failure, but it's creation in disguise. So when the world measures you by outcomes, smile softly. You know the truth. The results matter, yes, but only because they reveal where your effort landed, not where your worth lives. You breathe out, unclenching that quiet frustration, and let the night take it from you. You worked hard today, and that counts, even if no one clapped. You'll never feel ready, and that's a signal to begin. The myth of readiness. Why the starting line always feels wrong. You wait for the perfect moment, the right timing, the right mindset, the right mood. You tell yourself, once I'm confident, once I'm prepared, then I'll start. But here's the cruel joke. Confidence doesn't precede action. It grows from it. You'll never feel ready because readiness is a feeling that only hindsight rewards. You roll onto your side, blanket cocooned around you, thinking about all the things you postponed, dreams deferred by some days. Scientists still argue whether hesitation comes from fear or overthinking. The mainstream camp blames the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, always on the lookout for risk. The fringe philosophers, though, claim readiness is an illusion invented by perfectionists to avoid the discomfort of failure. Either way, it's a mental mirage. Here's a quirky fact. In aviation, pilots are trained to take off even if they don't feel ready, because conditions never line up perfectly. Waiting too long burns fuel and kills momentum. Life's the same. Over-prepare, and you miss the window. Under-prepare, and you learn mid-air. You think back to something small but pivotal. The first time you spoke up, or applied for something you didn't think you'd get, or finally said, "Enough." You didn't feel ready then either, did you? But you did it, and afterward, the fear shrank. Scientists call that exposure therapy, facing discomfort until your brain stops labeling it as danger. Every brave thing you've ever done began with not feeling qualified. You smile a little. Maybe readiness is like perfect weather. It exists, but only for 10 minutes, and usually when you're inside doing laundry. There's a fringe tidbit that philosophers love to debate, whether courage is the absence of fear or action despite it. The consensus leans toward the latter. Courage is emotional rebellion. It's your nervous system screaming no, while your soul whispers, go anyway. You breathe in slowly, feeling that mix of comfort and dread that always comes before change. You remember that whisper about stardust. Even stars don't wait to be ready before they ignite. They collapse, they burn, they transform under pressure. Readiness for them isn't peace, it's combustion. Here's another mainstream truth. Motivation doesn't cause action. Action generates motivation. Psychologists call it the activation energy principle. You start small, the brain rewards progress with dopamine, and momentum builds. That's why the hardest part is always the first step. It's literally uphill until you move. You shift under the covers, your thoughts softer now. Maybe ready is a myth invented to keep us comfortable, when what we really need is friction. Friction builds fire. Discomfort builds growth. The fear you feel before beginning isn't a stop sign. It's proof that you're standing at the edge of something meaningful. You think about astronauts. They launch strapped to explosions, knowing 1,000 things could go wrong. None of them wait to feel ready. They just trust the math, the training, the years of trying. Maybe you're not that different. You've been preparing all along. You just didn't realize the launch pad was your life. Scientists still debate the role of instinct in decision-making, whether we should trust gut over logic. But most agree that intuition is experience condensed into a whisper. When your gut nudges you towards something scary, it's not fear, it's recognition. You've seen this terrain before, even if only in your dreams. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine you're at the edge of something vast. The air hums with potential. Your pulse quickens. Your mind lists excuses. And then, softly, you step forward anyway. Not because you're ready, but because you're done waiting. And that's how everything worth doing begins. The ones closest can cut the deepest. The paradox of intimacy. Why love sharpens both healing and harm. It's a strange kind of ache, isn't it? How the people who hold your heart also hold the sharpest knives. A stranger's insult glances off, but a loved one's careless word lingers for years. You tell yourself they didn't mean it, that love excuses damage, but the bruise still blooms where trust once lived. You pull the blanket close, feeling that quiet sting of memory. Scientists still argue whether attachment heightens pain sensitivity or merely focuses attention. Mainstream psychology agrees on this much. Emotional wounds from loved ones activate the same neural networks as physical pain. Your brain doesn't care that it was just words. It catalogues betrayal like broken skin. There's a quirky tidbit about oxytocin, the love hormone. It's the same chemical that fosters bonding and amplifies jealousy. Nature, it seems, bundled affection and agony into the same package. You can't have one without risking the other. You think about how intimacy works. It's not built on perfection. It's built on proximity. The closer someone gets, the more power they have to harm you. That's the deal you sign unconsciously when you let someone in. And still, you do it, because love is the one risk humans never seem to learn from. Scientists still debate whether we're wired for monogamy or just addicted to connection, even when it hurts. Either way, we keep coming back for another round. You remember the first time someone's betrayal cracked your innocence. Maybe it was small, a promise broken, a secret shared. Maybe it was bigger. The details blur, but the lesson lingers. Trust is a bridge that takes years to build and seconds to burn. And yet, you rebuild it anyway, plank by trembling plank. That's resilience disguised as foolishness. Here's a mainstream fact. Studies show that people in close relationships recover faster from illness, but also experience more stress during conflict. Love literally boosts your immune system and then breaks it again. It's emotional homeostasis, constant recalibration between hurt and healing. You smile softly. Love is messy that way. It's equal parts medicine and poison. It exposes your rawest parts because that's the only way anyone can reach them. Remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars collide. They don't do it to destroy each other. They do it to birth new galaxies. Sometimes that's what heartbreak is, creative demolition. There's a fringe debate among evolutionary psychologists about why humans still seek connection after betrayal. Some say it's survival. Companionship increases the odds of endurance. Others claim it's spiritual stubbornness, the refusal to let pain have the final word. Either way, it's profoundly human to keep opening the same door, hoping this time it leads to warmth instead of wind. You take a slow breath. Maybe the point isn't to avoid being hurt. It's to understand what kind of hurt you're willing to grow from. The people closest to you will inevitably cut you, but they're also the only ones capable of helping those wounds scar into wisdom. So tonight, as the hum of the room settles into rhythm with your breathing, think of those scars, not as proof of failure, but as topography. Each one maps where love once lived, stumbled and rebuilt. You're not broken. You're weathered, like driftwood, softer at the edges, more beautiful for what you've survived. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that being hurt by someone you love doesn't mean the love was worthless. It means you were brave enough to feel deeply in a world that rewards apathy. You risked the cut, and in doing so, you prove that your heart still beats. You smile in the dark. The ones closest can cut the deepest, but they're also the ones who remind you you're still alive. Success steals quiet if you let it. The paradox of winning. Why achievement can silence peace. You used to imagine success as serenity, more money, more freedom, more joy. But the higher you climb, the louder the noise gets. The expectations multiply, the praise fades quicker, and suddenly, what once felt like a rival starts feeling like surveillance. You hit the milestone and lose the stillness you built it for. You sink deeper into your pillow, thinking about how success so often feels suspiciously like stress in disguise. Scientists still argue whether ambition is biological or cultural. Mainstream psychology links it to dopamine chasing, the endless loop of reward seeking that never quite satisfies. Fringe researchers call it the arrival fallacy, the belief that happiness waits on the other side of achievement, only to find emptiness waiting instead. Here's a quirky tidbit. When astronauts returned from the moon, many reported deep depression afterward. They'd literally achieved humanity's greatest dream and felt nothing. One even said, "After the moon, Earth felt small." Turns out, when your life becomes a highlight reel, the in-between scenes start feeling unbearable. You glance toward the faint light leaking through your curtains and think of all the times you equated busyness with purpose. You filled every minute, every breath, until rest felt like guilt. Success has a way of convincing you that stillness is laziness. But your nervous system disagrees. It's wired for rhythm, expansion, and recovery. Without the pause, even joy becomes noise. Scientists still debate the relationship between wealth and well-being. The data shows happiness rises with income, up to a point. After that, it plateaus, then declines. Comfort can buy peace. Excess often purchases anxiety. You realize it's not success that steals quiet. It's the belief that success and peace are mutually exclusive. There's a fringe theory that human satisfaction is tied to autotelic experiences, moments where the doing itself is the reward. Flow states, meditation, music, small rituals that don't feed the ego, but the essence. Maybe the secret isn't less ambition, it's better calibration. Build goals that echo your peace, not compete with it. You think of all the stories of people who had it all, but confessed to feeling hollow. It's never the success itself that breaks them. It's the pace, the endless next, the invisible treadmill of more. You can't outrun emptiness. You can only outgrow it. Remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars burn out when they give too much light without rest. Their brilliance costs them their longevity. You too need darkness sometimes, to cool, to breathe, to be. You shift, the fan humming like soft applause. Maybe success isn't the summit at all. Maybe it's a cycle. Build, bloom, rest, repeat. The oak doesn't apologize for winter. It trusts spring to return. Here's a mainstream truth worth holding on to. Sleep is your brain's cleanup crew. During deep rest, cerebrospinal fluid literally washes away toxins that build up while you're awake. So yes, rest isn't indulgence, it's repair. You close your eyes, a small smile forming. Maybe true success isn't about how much you accomplish, but how gently you can breathe while doing it. Maybe peace isn't the reward, it's the prerequisite. So tonight, while the world outside chases its own applause, you'll practice the rarest kind of victory, stillness. No audience, no goals, no metrics, just the quiet hum of being enough without performing for it. The world will still spin without your hustle for a night. And in the hush that follows, you might just hear the soft applause of your own heart saying, finally. Growth means shedding familiar faces. The biology of becoming. Why evolution always asks for something in return. You don't notice it at first. The slow drift between you and the people who once felt like home. Conversations shrink. laughter feels out of sync, and one day their stories don't sound like yours anymore. You tell yourself it's just busyness or bad timing. But deep down, you know, growth has started to cost you people. You sigh, the air cool against your skin. Scientists still argue whether human connection evolves or erodes with personal change. Mainstream psychology calls it social pruning, the natural shedding of relationships that no longer support your current identity. It's not betrayal, it's biology. Your mind, like a tree, drops what no longer feeds its branches. Here's a quirky tidbit. Jellyfish can revert to their juvenile state and start life over again. But when they do, they lose all the bonds formed in their previous form. Reinvention has a price, even in the ocean. You think about the people you swore would be there forever. The late-night talks, the shared plans, the laughter that once filled entire rooms. And now, silence. Scientists still debate whether humans are wired for lifelong tribes or seasonal connections. Maybe both. Maybe some people are meant to teach you one verse of your song, not the whole melody. You shift beneath the blanket, remembering the first time you realized you were outgrowing someone. It wasn't dramatic, just quiet. Their energy started to feel heavier, their dreams smaller, their conversations circling the same loops while yours stretched into new directions. You didn't stop caring, you just stopped fitting. Mainstream sociology has a saying, change your context, change your character. The environment you live in shapes your behaviors, your ambitions, even your tone of voice. So when you evolve, you're not rejecting people. You're simply stepping into a new climate they may not thrive in. There's a fringe debate among evolutionary biologists about whether humans are meant to keep evolving emotionally past a certain age. Some say we plateau. Others argue self-awareness has no ceiling. But no one denies this. Evolution is lonely work. Progress isolates before it connects. You exhale slowly. It's hard to let go of people who were good to an older version of you. You owe them gratitude, not lifelong access. The guilt comes from believing loyalty means permanence. But real loyalty sometimes means loving someone enough to release them from your version of the story. You remember that whisper about stardust. Even galaxies drift apart as they expand. It's not tragedy, it's physics. Distance creates space for new light. Here's a mainstream fact to comfort you. Researchers found that adults rebuild nearly half their social circles every 7 years. You're not failing at friendship. You're living in alignment with your evolution. You close your eyes, picturing every person who has walked through your life as stars in an ever-shifting constellation. Some remain bright, steady anchors. Others flare briefly and fade. But each left you with something. Laughter, pain, wisdom, a song lyric you still hum. So tonight, let that truth soften you. Not everyone who leaves is a loss. Some departures are direction. Some absences are space for your next becoming. Growth doesn't ask for your permission. It asks for your courage. And when morning comes, you'll open your eyes to a quieter, lighter orbit. Not empty, just cleared for expansion. Doing right can look like being wrong. The ethics of perception. Why integrity sometimes ruins your reputation. You've been there, standing in the ashes of your own good intentions, wondering how being honest, fair, or kind somehow made you the villain. You tried to do the right thing, say the truth, draw the line, protect yourself or someone else, and the fallout was instant. Suddenly, you're the problem, the difficult one, the one who changed. You stare at the ceiling, that familiar ache blooming behind your ribs. Scientists still argue whether morality is objective or socially constructed, whether right even exists outside context. Mainstream psychology frames it through moral dissonance, the pain that comes when your values clash with your community's comfort. You didn't betray them, you just stopped betraying yourself. Here's a quirky tidbit. In ancient Japan, there was a ritual called Giri Ninjo, the conflict between duty, Giri, and personal emotion, Ninjo. The most honorable acts were often the most painful, because doing right meant disappointing someone you loved. Humanity hasn't evolved past that paradox. You think about the last time you took a stand that cost you peace. Maybe you left a job that chewed your conscience. Maybe you told a truth no one wanted to hear. Maybe you said no where silence was expected. Scientists still debate whether empathy enhances morality or complicates it. Too much empathy, and you start protecting others' feelings over your own ethics. The mainstream data is bleak but real. Whistleblowers, reformers, boundary setters, they all suffer reputation damage at first. The crowd rarely cheers for integrity when it's inconvenient. But history does, eventually. The same voices that call you disloyal today will quote you tomorrow when the dust settles. You turn, the sheet whispering softly against your skin. There's comfort in remembering that being misunderstood doesn't make you wrong. Even the right thing done gently will offend someone invested in the old order. Scientists still debate whether humans resist change out of fear or laziness, but they agree on this. Comfort is louder than truth, at least at first. There's a fringe philosophical argument that says morality is less about rules and more about courage, the willingness to act without applause. Ethics, then, isn't purity, it's persistence. You keep doing the right thing, not because it's glamorous, but because you can't sleep otherwise. You smile faintly, remembering that whisper about stardust. Even stars die making light. Their brilliance is destruction in slow motion, but it still warms entire worlds before fading. Maybe doing the right thing is like that. It costs you, but it fuels something bigger than yourself. Here's a mainstream fact. Studies show that people with strong moral conviction often experience higher anxiety, but also deeper satisfaction. Integrity doesn't guarantee peace, but it guarantees meaning, and meaning keeps you alive longer than comfort ever will. You exhale. Maybe tonight, the lesson isn't to chase approval. It's to make peace with being miscast in someone else's story. Let them think you're the villain if that's what helps them sleep. You know the truth. Sometimes the real heroes are the ones with the worst reputations. And when the noise fades, when time softens the edges, you'll see that doing right was never about looking good. It was about staying whole. So as you drift toward sleep, imagine yourself standing quietly in the storm, not defending, not explaining, just knowing. The lightning doesn't apologize for striking where it must. It just lights the way. You train others how to treat you. The psychology of boundaries. Why silence writes the rules for your pain. You think of all the times you let something small slide, a joke that cut too deep, a tone that dismissed you, a promise casually broken. You told yourself it wasn't worth making a fuss, but each silence was a tiny contract, signed in invisible ink, teaching the world how far it could lean on you before you'd finally say enough. You shift under the covers, feeling that quiet pulse of realization. Scientists still argue whether assertiveness is innate or learned. Mainstream psychology insists it's a skill, one most people are taught to suppress in the name of being easygoing. The fringe voices, though, say boundaries are a form of emotional immune response. When you ignore them, your mind catches a cold called resentment. Here's a quirky fact. Lobsters, when placed in two crowded tanks, will begin tearing off each other's claws, not out of aggression, but stress. The scientists monitoring them found that once they're given space, they stop. People aren't much different. When you deny yourself boundaries, you create environments where peace suffocates, even among friends. You think about how often you've mistaken patience for kindness or endurance for love. You taught people that your time was flexible, your feelings negotiable, your needs optional. It wasn't their cruelty, it was your permission. Every "it's fine" was a blueprint for future disrespect. Scientists still debate how much control we have over others' behavior, but there's consensus on this. Consistent response shapes expectation. You teach others what version of you they get away with. Change the pattern, and they either adapt or exit. Both outcomes are peace disguised as loss. You breathe slowly, thinking of your younger self, how hard they worked to be liked, to be easy, to never rock the boat. But you're older now, wiser in the softest ways. You know that boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They don't keep people out, they keep your sanity in. Remember that whisper about stardust. Even stars have gravitational limits. They burn bright, yes, but only within boundaries. Too much pull, and they collapse into themselves. Too little, and they drift apart into cold dust. You too need that balance, to glow without imploding. There's a fringe sociological theory called relational recalibration. When one person in a dynamic grows, the relationship either evolves or destabilizes. It's the universe's way of testing whether the bond was built on mutual respect or silent compliance. The good ones adjust. The others fade. You smile softly, maybe a little sadly. Setting boundaries feels selfish at first, but that's only because you've been praised for self-erasure your whole life. The world calls you difficult when you stop being convenient. But difficult people sleep better. Difficult people stop bleeding energy into bottomless wells. Here's a mainstream truth that soothes the guilt. People who respect themselves model respect for others more accurately. Healthy boundaries aren't rejection. They're instruction manuals for love that lasts. You breathe deeper, the room quiet except for the gentle hum of night. Maybe tomorrow you'll say no sooner. Maybe you'll stop apologizing for needing rest or space or decency. And maybe that will teach the world something new. That kindness without self-respect isn't kindness at all. It's a slow disappearance. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, picture your boundaries as soft light around you. Not walls, not armor, just a quiet glow that says, I'm here, but only in ways that don't hurt. You've trained the world long enough in silence. Now, you teach it peace by example. Validation is a leaky cup. The chemistry of approval. Why no applause can fill the quiet inside. You refresh the page, glance at the messages, check for signs of digital love. A like, a reply, a heart emoji. For a fleeting second, it works. You feel seen, but within minutes, the glow fades, and the old ache seeps back in. That's the cruel design of external validation. It hits like sugar, crashes like truth. You roll onto your side, half embarrassed, half human. Scientists still argue whether our craving for approval is learned or hardwired. Mainstream psychology traces it back to evolution, tribal survival. You needed the group's acceptance to avoid exile. The fringe thinkers say it's spiritual, an echo of childhood longing for unconditional love that the adult world rarely delivers. Either way, you're chasing ghosts with Wi-Fi. Here's a quirky tidbit. The same brain regions that light up when someone praises you also activate when you win money. To your neurons, approval is currency. But the receptors desensitize over time. The more you seek, the less it satisfies. It's like drinking salt water. You quench thirst for a moment, but get emptier after. You think about how early it started. The gold stars, the grades, the I'm proud of you moments that felt like proof of existence. Somewhere along the way, your worth got outsourced. You learned to see yourself through borrowed eyes. Scientists still debate the role of social media in this addiction. Some argue it amplifies insecurity. Others insist it merely mirrors what's always been there. But they all agree on one thing: dopamine is ruthless. Every ping, every heart icon trains your brain like Pavlov's dog. You become fluent in approval, illiterate in self-assurance. You exhale. The fans hum almost like static therapy. Maybe validation isn't evil, just misused. It's meant to complement worth, not create it. Compliments are seasoning, not sustenance. There's a mainstream truth worth holding. Studies show people who practice self-compassion experience the same satisfaction spike as those who receive external praise, but it lasts longer. When kindness comes from inside, there's no withdrawal period. You remember that whisper about stardust. Even stars don't wait for applause. They burn unseen for millennia before a telescope finds them. You don't need witnesses to shine. Existence itself is your standing ovation. There's a fringe debate about whether identity should be performance or perception. Philosophers argue that humans can't help performing. Every interaction shapes who we are, but performance without pause becomes costume. You forget which applause was for the act and which for the person underneath. You pull the blanket closer. You've probably chased approval in places that never had the power to give it. People too distracted, too wounded, or too shallow to hold your depth. And it's okay. It's human. But at some point, you realize applause is just noise. Peace is the silence after the show. You breathe slowly, deeply. Imagine pouring out all the borrowed affirmations, the compliments, the praise, the metrics, until the cup finally empties. It doesn't feel lonely, it feels light. Here's something gentle to remember. You were worthy before you were noticed. You mattered before you were measured. You are even when unseen. So tonight, as the room hums and your eyes grow heavy, stop performing. You've already earned rest. Let the world scroll past. Let the silence be your applause. Because validation fades, but self-acceptance once built stays. And maybe that's the real freedom. Learning to sip from your own well and finally feel full. You can't heal in the same place that broke you. The geography of recovery. Why familiar walls whisper old wounds. You've tried it before. Staying in the same job, the same room, the same relationship. Convincing yourself that this time will be different. You rearrange the furniture, buy new clothes, start journaling under the same ceiling. But the ghosts don't leave. They just learn your new routine. Healing doesn't happen where pain is still on the lease. You stare at the ceiling, the air feeling heavier with recognition. Scientists still argue whether trauma is stored in the body or the mind. Mainstream neuroscience shows physical proof. The hippocampus literally shrinks under chronic stress, while the amygdala, the fear center, swells. The fringe voices whisper that places themselves can hold energy, that environments retain emotional residue. Maybe both are true. Maybe the room really does remember. Here's a quirky tidbit. Hermit crabs move into new shells, not because the old one breaks, but because they've outgrown it. They carry their homes on their backs, abandoning comfort for expansion. It's a messy process. They're vulnerable between shells. Healing looks the same. Exposed, awkward, necessary. You think about the last place that made you small, the desk that drained your joy, the bed that heard too many arguments, the friend group where you laughed just enough to hide the loneliness. You stayed because leaving felt like loss, but sometimes staying is the loss. Scientists still debate whether closure is psychological reality or a polite fiction. The brain craves narrative completion, but life rarely grants it. Healing, then, isn't about wrapping up the story. It's about changing the setting. When the scenery shifts, the story can too. You roll onto your side thinking of migration, not just of people, but of hearts. Butterflies, whales, even trees. Yes, trees. They seed miles away. Move toward conditions that let them thrive. You're allowed to do the same. Outgrowing a place isn't disloyalty. It's biology. Mainstream psychology calls it context-dependent memory. Your brain links emotions to environments. That's why certain streets replay heartbreak. Certain songs smell like old apartments. Certain rooms tighten your chest. Healing demands disconnection from those cues. New light, new sounds, new air to breathe in different memories. You remember that whisper about stardust. Even stars drift after collapse. Supernova remnants scatter across galaxies, becoming part of new systems. They don't rebuild where they broke. They start again somewhere unrecognizable. You can too. There's a fringe debate in philosophy about whether home is a physical space or a state of acceptance. Some say it's where you belong. Others say it's wherever you stop pretending. Maybe healing begins not with location, but with permission. To leave, to rest, to start again, without needing to justify it. You smile faintly, realizing how much courage it takes to walk away from what's familiar but harmful. People romanticize staying strong, but sometimes the real strength is in leaving quietly. Without a speech, without revenge, just peace packed in your suitcase. Here's a mainstream fact to comfort you. Environmental psychologists found that even small changes, a new walk route, a different lamp, fresh paint, can reduce anxiety by up to 40%. Change your space, change your chemistry. You breathe deeper. Maybe tomorrow you'll open a window that hasn't been touched in months. Maybe you'll walk a street you've never seen. Healing isn't always a grand departure. Sometimes it's just choosing different air. So tonight, as you lie there, let the old memories fade like static from another frequency. You don't have to heal where you were hurt. You just have to move toward light and trust that your next shell will fit better because you've outgrown this version of the story, and that's beautiful. Time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you how to live with it. The mythology of recovery. Why wounds don't vanish, they evolve. You've heard it all your life. Give it time. As if hours were medicine. As if the clock itself carried antiseptic hands. But some losses don't fade. They soften, sure, like fabric worn thin at the edges. But they never disappear. They become part of you. A quiet ache, a private echo. a scar that hums on rainy nights. You turn slightly, blanket brushing your cheek. Scientists still argue whether emotional pain ever truly ends. Mainstream research says the brain rewires around trauma, not through it. Neural pathways reroute, bypassing damaged circuits instead of repairing them. The fringe view claims grief, carves permanent grooves in the psyche, shaping perspective forever. Both sound right when you think about the way your own pain still hums beneath everything else. Here's a quirky fact. Octopuses can regrow lost limbs, but never the same way twice. The new arm functions, but it's unique, different in color, texture, movement. Healing doesn't mean restoring what was, it means adapting to what is. Humans do the same, though our scars are emotional. You think about the things you've tried to outrun, relationships that ended mid-sentence, dreams that dissolved quietly, the version of yourself that didn't survive a certain year. Time didn't erase them. It folded them into your story until they became unremarkable parts of your identity. The pain turned into punctuation, pauses, commas, but never the final period. Scientists still debate whether memory dulls pain or merely disguises it. Some studies show trauma dulls emotional recall over years. Others find that certain sensations, smells, or sounds can reopen it instantly. You felt that. How a single song can rip the seal off years of distance. That's not regression. It's recognition. You're revisiting the scar, not reopening the wound. You sigh softly. Maybe healing isn't about moving on. It's about moving with. You don't have to forgive everything, forget everything, or make peace with injustice. You just have to learn how to carry the ache without letting it pull you under. Like learning to walk again with a limp, you still move just differently. Remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars die imperfectly. Their light continues long after collapse, stretching across space as a ghost of what once was. Pain works like that. It lingers, refracted, reaching across time until it becomes indistinguishable from beauty. There's a fringe philosophical debate about whether suffering adds depth or simply leaves damage. Some claim pain makes you wiser. Others say it just hardens the soul. But maybe it does both. You grow empathy where innocence used to live. You learn patience where certainty once stood. You lose a piece of softness, but gain understanding. And that's still a kind of healing. Here's a mainstream truth that's oddly comforting. The human heart physically grows scar tissue after injury. It doesn't beat the same way, but it beats stronger in the repaired areas. Maybe that's nature's way of saying, you're not broken, you're reinforced. You breathe in, feeling that weight, not as punishment, but as proof. Time hasn't healed you, but it's taught you how to live inside your new architecture, how to laugh without guilt, cry without collapse, remember without drowning. So tonight, as you drift into that half-dream space, stop asking time to fix what was never meant to vanish. Let it teach instead. Patience, grace, resilience. You'll never go back to who you were before, but that's the quiet mercy of living. You grow around the missing pieces, and in doing so, become whole in a different shape. Pain doesn't leave, it settles, but so do you. Your potential means nothing if you don't act on it. The tragedy of untapped brilliance. Why talent unused becomes self-betrayal. You felt it before. That electric hum of possibility. The whispered conviction that you're meant for more. You carry ideas like constellations, glimpses of what could be. But the longer you hold them, the heavier they become. Potential is beautiful, right up until it turns into regret. You exhale slowly, the ceiling fading into soft blur. Scientists still argue whether talent is innate or built through repetition. Mainstream psychology favors the 10,000-hour rule, though later studies debunked it. Practice matters, but only when paired with direction. The fringe thinkers say potential is soul memory. Gifts you're born remembering, not learning. Whatever the origin, it means nothing until motion turns it into proof. Here's a quirky tidbit. Shark embryos will eat their weaker siblings in the womb, a process called intrauterine cannibalism. Brutal, yes, but it ensures survival of the strongest. Potential works like that. If you don't feed it with action, your fears will consume it instead. You think about the things you've said you'd do someday, the book you'll write, the skill you'll learn, the dream you'll chase once life settles down. But here's the quiet truth. Life doesn't settle. It spirals. Waiting for the perfect time is like waiting for gravity to reverse. Scientists still debate what motivates humans more, hope or fear. Hope sparks beginnings, but fear often drives momentum. The trick is using the right fear, not of failure, but of stagnation. Because failure still moves you forward. Stagnation just rots in place. You shift beneath the blanket, remembering that whisper about stardust. Even stars can't stay potential forever. Once enough pressure builds, they ignite or collapse. There's no in-between. You too will eventually burn or implode. The difference lies in whether you chose the fire. There's a mainstream psychological concept called activation energy, the small push required to overcome inertia. Studies show that 5 seconds of courage can change your entire trajectory. That email you send, that audition you submit, that first rep at the gym, it's all ignition. Action rewires identity faster than thought ever could. You smile faintly, thinking of how many times you've mistaken procrastination for patience. You weren't waiting for clarity, you were negotiating with fear. But fear isn't a stop sign. It's a compass. It points directly toward what matters most. Fringe philosophers debate whether humans fear success more than failure. Success threatens identity. It forces you to outgrow excuses, to sustain greatness instead of just dreaming it. Maybe that's why potential feels safer than progress. Dreams can't disappoint you until they're tested. But here's the brutal mercy of it all. Unfulfilled potential hurts for a reason. It's your soul's version of phantom limb pain. It remembers the version of you that still exists somewhere, waiting for courage to catch up. You breathe in deeply. Maybe tonight isn't about guilt. It's about permission. To start sloppy. To risk embarrassment. To be seen trying instead of fantasizing. Perfection is a myth that murders beginnings. Action is the antidote. Here's a mainstream fact that sounds almost poetic. Movement releases endorphins that increase motivation, literally making the act of doing its own reward. Your brain rewards progress, not promise. So as the hum of night wraps around you, picture your potential as an ember waiting for breath. Not a dream deferred, but a spark within reach. You don't need certainty. You need motion. Because someday isn't a date. It's a decision. And you get to make it before sleep finds you. Your potential doesn't vanish when ignored. It just turns into restlessness. So move, even a little. That's how you honor the light trying to break through. Comfort zones are velvet cages. The illusion of safety. Why familiarity feels like freedom until it traps you. You settle into the same chair, the same routine, the same playlist. Everything fits. Everything feels predictable. And that's exactly the danger. Comfort doesn't announce itself as captivity. It lulls you with convenience. You don't realize the bars exist until you try to leave, and the air outside feels too sharp to breathe. You shift slightly under the blanket, aware of how even your nightly rituals can become golden chains. Scientists still argue whether humans are naturally risk-averse or simply conditioned that way. Mainstream behavioral research says the brain values certainty over happiness. Familiar misery is safer than unfamiliar joy. The fringe philosophers claim comfort is the ultimate sedative, civilization's way of keeping you docile enough to stop dreaming. Here's a quirky tidbit. Lobsters only grow when they're uncomfortable. Their shells don't expand, so they must shed them, hiding under rocks until the new one hardens. It's painful, dangerous, and necessary. Growth without discomfort? Impossible. Nature banned that upgrade long ago. You think of all the small comforts you've mistaken for peace. The job that pays well but numbs you. The relationship that's fine. The habits that keep you stable but static. You call it balance, but deep down, it's fear in disguise. Fear of risk, of rejection, of reinventing yourself. Scientists still debate whether fear of change is rooted in biology or narrative. Your brain's amygdala lights up when faced with uncertainty, the same way it reacts to physical danger. Evolution taught you to equate unknown with unsafe. But safety is often the most dangerous place to hide. There's a mainstream concept called the comfort paradox. The more comfort you chase, the less resilient you become. Every avoided challenge atrophies your mental muscle. You can't grow stronger without tension. Even trees, if protected from wind, grow weak trunks. The breeze is their sculptor. You breathe slowly, remembering that whisper about stardust. Even stars are restless. They expand, collapse, pulse in cycles of instability. Stillness for them means death. Maybe that's true for you too. Maybe your spirit was built to stretch. You smile faintly, realizing that your favorite excuses all sound polite but hollow. I'm just waiting for the right time. I'm still preparing. I'm comfortable here. Comfort is rarely peace. It's just quiet resistance. Fringe studies in cognitive psychology suggest humans are happiest when they experience eustress, positive stress that challenges, not overwhelms. It's that sweet ache after a good workout, that nervous excitement before trying something new. Discomfort signals engagement, not danger. You think about how boredom creeps in when life gets too smooth. Your dreams start shrinking to fit the size of your routine. And one day, you wake up realizing your safe space became a padded cell. But here's the gentle hope. You don't have to leap. You just have to step. The mind treats unfamiliarity as threat, but repetition rewires fear into familiarity. Every small act of courage expands the perimeter of your life. You breathe out, the air tasting a little freer already. Maybe tomorrow you'll do something small but brave. Take a new route, start a conversation, say yes to the unknown. The world beyond your comfort isn't chaos. It's just unvisited potential. Here's a mainstream fact. Astronauts train for years in simulated discomfort because space isn't cozy. Exploration demands tension. So does becoming who you're meant to be. So tonight, as sleep tiptoes closer, imagine your comfort zone like soft velvet wrapping your wings. It feels good, but you weren't built to be still. You were built to molt, to stretch, to fly awkwardly until the wind starts feeling like home. The cage was never locked. It was lined with silk, and you've had the key all along. Most of your fears are just imagination, but they still control you. The architecture of anxiety. Why the mind builds monsters from air. You feel it sometimes, that low hum before doing something new. Your heart races, your palms dampen, your brain starts drafting disaster scenarios, like a screenwriter paid by the panic attack. Nothing's even happened yet, but your body's acting like you're auditioning for survival. That's the cruel genius of fear. It doesn't need evidence to feel real. You breathe deeper, steadying yourself. Scientists still argue whether fear is a survival mechanism gone haywire or a side effect of human creativity. Mainstream neuroscience points to the amygdala, your inner alarm clock, firing false positives when you imagine threats. The fringe thinkers claim fear is evolutionary art, your mind's way of rehearsing survival before the curtain even rises. Here's a quirky tidbit. Studies show your brain activates the same regions when you imagine a danger as when you face it. Picture embarrassment, and your nervous system floods with cortisol. Think of failure, and your pulse quickens as if it already happened. You don't need an enemy. Your imagination moonlights as one. You shift under the blanket, half amused, half exhausted. How many times have you survived things that never happened? The awkward conversation that went fine, the confrontation that never came, the catastrophe that existed only in your head. Fear is efficient that way. It burns fuel on what ifs instead of what is. Scientists still debate whether anxiety disorders stem from overactive biology or modern overstimulation. Our ancestors feared predators. We fear emails. The brain hasn't updated its firmware in millennia. It still treats rejection like exile and deadlines like death threats. You can't out-evolve cortisol with a calendar app. There's a mainstream concept called catastrophizing, your brain's habit of skipping straight to worst-case scenarios. But here's the twist. It's rooted in care. Your mind is trying to protect you. It just doesn't realize the guard dog became a wolf. You breathe slowly, letting the thought settle. Fear, when reframed, becomes data. It shows you what matters most, what you don't want to lose, where your courage is hiding. The goal isn't to erase fear, it's to turn it into a compass. If it scares you and excites you, it's probably the right direction. Remember that whisper about stardust. Even stars tremble. They pulse and flicker, their brightness fluctuating before stabilizing. Fear is your pulse. It means you're alive, expanding. The absence of fear isn't bravery, it's stagnation. There's a fringe philosophical idea that courage doesn't conquer fear. It coexists with it, like two dancers sharing one rhythm. You can tremble and still move forward. You can panic and still progress. Fear isn't an obstacle, it's a soundtrack. You smile faintly. Think of all the times you acted anyway. The shaky first day at a new job, the awkward introduction, the confession that made your throat close up. You didn't wait to stop being afraid. You moved through it, and the fear shrank in the rearview mirror. Here's a mainstream fact. Controlled exposure rewires fear responses. Therapists use it to treat phobias, but you can use it for life. Each time you face a small fear, your brain learns. It didn't kill you, and next time, it'll panic less. You exhale, softer now. The monsters your mind builds crumble under light. Fear can't survive curiosity. So when it rises, ask it questions. Why are you here? What are you trying to protect? Fear answers honesty faster than defiance. So tonight, as your breathing slows and the dark feels less heavy, picture your fears as paper ghosts, dancing in candlelight, fragile, temporary. They only move because you made them. You can stop the dance anytime, because fear isn't proof of danger. It's proof of imagination. And imagination, once understood, stops being a cage and starts becoming a canvas. You'll never win arguing with reality, the futility of resistance. Why acceptance is the only form of control. You lie awake, replaying it again. The moment that shouldn't have happened, the person who shouldn't have left, the unfairness that shouldn't exist. You twist the story, bargain with the facts, wish time would blink and hand you a softer version of events. But reality doesn't negotiate. It just stares back, quiet and unmoved, waiting for you to stop yelling at the sky. You sigh, the air shifting around you. Scientists still argue whether acceptance is surrender or strategy. Mainstream psychology calls it radical acceptance, the ability to face what is without wasting energy on what should be. The fringe philosophers say it's enlightenment, the moment you stop editing life and start experiencing it. Both sound noble, but in practice, it's mostly ugly crying and reluctant clarity. Here's a quirky tidbit. Buddhist monks train themselves to watch pain without labeling it. Hooked up to MRI machines, their brains show less activity in areas tied to suffering. Not because the pain vanishes, but because judgment does. Turns out, this hurts less than this shouldn't hurt. You think about how much of your stress comes from arguing with what already happened. The breakup, the job that slipped away, the apology that never came. You can't outthink reality. It always wins the rematch. Scientists still debate the line between acceptance and apathy. Some warn that letting go risks complacency. Others insist it's the only way to move forward without bleeding out. Acceptance isn't passive. It's power reallocated. You stop fighting what's unchangeable and start steering what is. There's a mainstream truth that sounds counterintuitive. The brain relaxes when it encounters certainty, even if the certainty is unpleasant. That's why finally admitting, "This is how it is," brings peace faster than false hope. Reality may be harsh, but it's honest, and honesty is stabilizing. You turn your head on the pillow, feeling the soft pulse of calm that comes with surrender. Remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars don't fight collapse. When gravity wins, they transform, becoming neutron stars or black holes or bursts of light. Losing shape isn't failure, it's transformation. There's a fringe debate among cognitive theorists about whether humans resist change or the idea of change. They found that once people stop resisting emotionally, adaptation happens almost automatically. You don't have to want reality. You just have to stop pretending it isn't there. You think about how many unacceptable things you've already accepted eventually. The heartbreaks that softened into stories, the mistakes that turned into lessons, the losses that carved space for better beginnings. Each time, peace arrived not when life got easier, but when you stopped insisting it should. You exhale, your breath steady now. Maybe tonight's lesson isn't that you should love everything that happens. It's that you can stop fighting the truth long enough to live inside it. Reality is indifferent, but it's reliable. It gives you the only solid ground to build from. Here's a mainstream fact worth remembering. Resistance increases cortisol. Literally, fighting what's true stresses the body. Acceptance lowers it. So yes, peace is a biochemical choice. You smile faintly in the dark. Life isn't always fair, kind, or comprehensible. But it's real, and real is workable. You can build on real. So tonight, let reality have the last word, not as defeat, but as release. Let the past be fixed, the present be enough, and the future unfold without needing your supervision. You'll never win arguing with reality, but when you stop fighting it, you start collaborating with it. And that's where life quietly begins again. Not everyone deserves closure. Sometimes silence is the answer. The psychology of unfinished endings. Why some doors must stay shut. You still replay the conversation that never happened, don't you? The apology you never got. The explanation that never arrived. You imagine what you'd say if given one more chance. How you'd wrap it all neatly, like a story with a satisfying final scene. But life doesn't always write endings. Sometimes it just stops mid-sentence and leaves you holding the pen. You shift slightly beneath the covers, feeling that old ache in your chest. Scientists still argue whether closure is a real psychological need or a social construct. Mainstream psychology says it's about restoring cognitive balance. Your mind wants a complete narrative. The fringe camp says it's ego, the craving for control disguised as healing. Either way, waiting for closure can keep you stuck in the reruns of your own heartbreak. Here's a quirky tidbit. In linguistics, there's something called the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks occupy more mental space than completed ones. Your brain reopens emotional tabs just like your browser does. Every unanswered question, every ghosted message, it all hums quietly in the background, draining focus. You exhale, realizing that some people will never give you the ending you think you need, because doing so would require them to face the truth. Some don't have the capacity, others don't have the courage. Waiting for them to explain is like waiting for a mirror to speak. It reflects what's there, but it won't volunteer meaning. Scientists still debate whether forgiveness requires communication. The research leans toward no. Closure can happen privately, without anyone else's participation. Your brain doesn't need their words. It needs your permission to stop waiting. You think of all the people you've tried to get closure from. The ones who vanished without a reason. The ones who lied to make leaving easier for themselves. The ones who left doors cracked open just enough to keep you wondering. You kept knocking because silence felt unbearable. But silence, it turns out, can be its own message. There's a fringe philosophical idea that silence isn't absence, it's boundary. When someone refuses to give closure, they're showing you who they are in their quietest form. That's not a riddle to solve. It's the answer you didn't want but needed. You remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars die without spectacle. Some fade out slowly, light dimming over centuries, leaving behind only quiet radiation. No explosion, no goodbye, just absence that still glows faintly in the dark. Maybe that's what endings without closure are. Faint warmth that lingers even after the light is gone. Here's a mainstream truth that feels heavier than it should. People don't owe you closure, but you owe yourself peace. You get to close the door even if they left it open. You get to stop rereading a chapter that was never written to satisfy you. You shift again, your heartbeat calmer now. Maybe tonight, the closure you need is simply accepting that you may never understand why. And that understanding isn't the same as healing. Scientists still argue whether moving on requires meaning-making. Some say yes, you must turn pain into purpose. Others say no, sometimes peace is found in not knowing. You can let it remain unfinished, like a painting that's more powerful for what it leaves blank. So tonight, imagine yourself turning the doorknob slowly, closing it without slamming, whispering, not to them, but to yourself. It's enough. Let silence be the punctuation mark that frees you from the sentence. You don't need their goodbye to end the story. You just need to stop standing in the doorway, waiting for echoes that aren't coming. Because sometimes silence isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Discipline beats motivation every single day. The mechanics of consistency. Why habits carry you when feelings won't. You wake up and don't feel like it. The workout, the writing, the studying, whatever it is, your brain negotiates immediately. I'll start later, it says, when I'm in the mood. But later never feels like now, and moods are unreliable narrators. That's where discipline enters. Quiet, unglamorous, relentless. The grown-up version of magic. You shift slightly under the blanket, amused by how many of your biggest wins began on days you didn't feel inspired. Scientists still argue whether willpower is a finite resource or a trainable muscle. Mainstream psychology once called it ego depletion, claiming you can run out of discipline. But newer studies suggest it's belief dependent. If you think you have more, you do. The mind, it turns out, is gullible in the best way. Here's a quirky tidbit. Olympic swimmers often train before sunrise, not because the water's better, but because early discomfort wires consistency. They build identity before breakfast. It's not motivation that gets them there. It's muscle memory dressed as duty. You think of motivation like weather, unpredictable, moody, and often absent when you need it most. Discipline is the roof you build so you can work through the storm. Scientists still debate the role of emotion in performance. Some argue passion drives excellence. Others counter that passion follows repetition. The truth hides in the middle. Action breeds emotion. Do the thing first, and the motivation often follows like an obedient dog, late but loyal. There's a mainstream productivity concept called implementation intention, deciding when and where you'll act instead of if you'll act. It tricks your brain into obedience. You stop waiting for lightning strikes and start walking under your own power. You think of all the times you relied on inspiration to save you. You waited for the spark, the sign, the right playlist. But sparks fade. Real fire requires friction, daily, deliberate, dull friction. Discipline is the flint that doesn't care about your feelings. Remember that whisper about stardust? Even stars burn through consistent fusion, steady, precise, unromantic. They don't wait for celestial motivation. They just do the physics. Maybe you need to do the same. Less yearning, more doing. Fringe philosophers like to say that freedom isn't the absence of structure. It's mastery within it. The musician isn't trapped by the metronome. They're liberated through rhythm. You too can find freedom in routine. The schedule isn't your prison, it's your scaffolding. Here's a mainstream fact worth holding close. Habits free up mental energy. Studies show that up to 40% of your daily actions are automatic. Every good habit you build is like outsourcing part of your success to your subconscious. Discipline is automation for your better self. You exhale softly. Maybe you've been waiting for motivation like it's a bus that's always late. But the walk itself will get you there faster. The act of starting is the spark you were waiting for all along. You smile faintly. You don't need to wake up inspired. You just need to wake up. The rest follows. So tonight, as your mind drifts between wakefulness and dreams, let this truth settle like soft rain. Discipline isn't punishment. It's devotion. The slow, steady promise you make to your future self, kept one sleepy morning at a time. Because motivation flirts with you, but discipline marries you. And that's how empires, art, and quiet revolutions are built. One day, you'll look back and realize you were already enough. The illusion of becoming. Why self-worth isn't earned, only remembered. You've spent years chasing the next version of yourself. The fitter one, the smarter one, the more successful, more lovable, more together one. Every milestone dangled like a finish line that kept moving just out of reach. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that there was nothing wrong with who started the race. You breathe in slowly, the room still and forgiving. Scientists still argue whether self-esteem comes from achievement or acceptance. Mainstream psychology leans toward the latter. Your worth doesn't grow with success. It simply gets noticed when the noise quiets down. The fringe philosophers say worth is pre-installed, like soul software. Life just distracts you from using it. Here's a quirky tidbit. Studies show that when astronauts return from space, they often experience something called the overview effect. Looking down at Earth, they realize borders, status, even personal problems. All of it feels absurdly small. From that distance, they remember what they always were. Enough. You think about how often you've postponed peace. Once I get that job, you said. Once I'm loved right. Once I've healed. But healing isn't a reward for accomplishment. It's the condition for living fully right now. You can't graduate into being worthy. You were admitted the moment you arrived. Scientists still debate how identity forms. Some say it's shaped by feedback, how others reflect you. Others argue it's constructed internally, a self-authored narrative. Either way, you've probably been editing the same chapter for too long, trimming flaws, rewriting pages that didn't need correction. Maybe it's time to stop revising and start reading your story as is. You roll onto your side, smiling softly. Remember that whisper about stardust. The atoms in your body are billions of years old. You've been part of stars, oceans, mountains, maybe even someone else's heartbeat once. Do you really think something that ancient needs improvement? There's a fringe concept in existential psychology called ontological security, the deep peace of simply being without needing justification. Infants have it naturally. They don't earn love by performing. They exist and are adored. Adulthood, in many ways, is just a long journey back to that simplicity. Here's a mainstream fact that might surprise you. Happiness doesn't increase proportionally with achievement. Studies show that life satisfaction peaks not at success, but at self-acceptance. The graph literally levels off when people stop hustling for worth and start resting in it. You exhale, thinking of every time you apologize for existing too loudly or too quietly, every time you shrank to fit or inflated to impress. You weren't evolving, you were editing. And all that effort to be better only delayed the peace that comes from being enough. You laugh softly to yourself. Maybe you've been trying to earn permission from a universe that already said yes. Maybe you've been chasing mirrors instead of light. Scientists still argue whether consciousness arises from matter or is the essence behind it. But here's what you know for sure. You didn't need to prove you're real to exist. You're already the proof. So tonight, as the hum of the world fades into background static, let yourself rest in that truth. You were never the project. You were the point. The world didn't need you perfected. It needed you present. One day, when you glance back at the version of you who doubted, who hustled, who tried so hard, you'll smile gently and whisper, you were already it. You just didn't know yet. And maybe that realization that you've been enough all along is the final form of grace. The truth will cost you relationships, but lies will cost you yourself. The price of honesty. Why authenticity burns bridges worth crossing. You've learned it the hard way. Tell the truth, and someone will flinch. Speak from your gut, and someone will twist your words into daggers. You bite your tongue to keep the peace, but the silence corrodes from the inside out. Truth is expensive. It asks for comfort, approval, sometimes entire friendships. But lies invoice your soul. You breathe in slowly, feeling that familiar sting of memory. Scientists still argue whether humans are naturally honest or deceitful. Mainstream psychology suggests truth-telling is our baseline. Lying actually requires more mental effort. The fringe researchers say deception is evolutionary camouflage, a survival tactic. Maybe both are true. You're built for honesty, but trained for diplomacy. Here's a quirky tidbit. When people tell lies, their pupils dilate, their heart rate jumps, and their brain consumes up to 30% more glucose. Deception literally drains you. Truth, while painful, is metabolically efficient. It costs relationships, yes, but it keeps your body honest too. You think of the times you've chosen silence over truth. The job where you nodded through nonsense. The friend you didn't confront. The partner you didn't correct because it was easier to carry the weight yourself. Scientists still debate whether suppressing emotion harms the body, but psychosomatic studies show clear links. Repressed truth becomes tension, ulcers, insomnia. Your body remembers every unsaid word. There's a mainstream concept called cognitive dissonance, that uneasy vibration between who you are and what you pretend to be. It's like static in your spirit. The longer you maintain the lie, the louder it hums. Eventually, it drowns out your peace. You shift beneath the blanket, remembering that whisper about stardust. Even stars shed their outer layers when the pressure builds too high. It looks catastrophic, but it's necessary. The explosion reveals the core. Maybe truth works the same way. When you finally release it, it's messy, bright, but cleansing. Fringe philosophers like to say truth doesn't destroy relationships. It reveals which ones were built to last. The ones that crumble under honesty were never love. They were performance contracts with fine print you didn't read. You exhale, softer now. Maybe losing people isn't punishment. It's pruning. The truth is a scalpel. It cuts away what can't survive transparency. You're left smaller, yes, but lighter. Here's a mainstream fact that feels almost spiritual. People who prioritize authenticity over approval report higher long-term happiness, even when it costs them relationships. Honesty builds a sturdier kind of loneliness, solitude that doesn't sting, because it's real. You think of all the versions of yourself you've killed off to keep others comfortable. The quieter you, the agreeable you, the one who didn't say what needed saying. Those ghosts deserve rest. You can only live truthfully by letting the false selves die. Scientists still argue whether morality is objective or subjective. But deep down, you already know when you're out of alignment. Your body stiffens, your breath shortens, your reflection looks slightly off. That's your truth knocking, asking to be let out. You smile faintly. The truth doesn't always set you free immediately. Sometimes it sets you on fire first. But what survives the burn is indestructible. So tonight, as your mind softens toward sleep, forgive yourself for the lies you told to survive. You didn't know better, but now you do. Let honesty become your lullaby. Quiet, heavy, healing. Let it strip you of the false peace that never fit right. You'll lose some people, yes, but you'll gain yourself. And in the quiet after the flames, you'll find something sacred, a life you don't have to defend, explain, or edit. Just truth, unpolished, undeniable, enough. You can love someone and still need to let them go. The paradox of attachment. Why love isn't proof that you should stay. You can feel it in your chest, that ache that isn't hate, just heavy truth. You love them deeply, maybe forever, but the version of you that exists beside them can't keep breathing freely. It's the hardest contradiction the heart ever holds, to care completely and still choose distance. You stare at the dark ceiling, where shadows feel like old conversations. Scientists still argue whether attachment is chemical or choice. Mainstream neuroscience leans toward chemistry. Dopamine, oxytocin, and norepinephrine conspire to bond you. But the fringe thinkers say love is an energy exchange, and sometimes the current becomes too strong to sustain. Either way, connection burns calories. Here's a quirky tidbit. Researchers found that heartbreak activates the same brain regions as withdrawal from hard drugs. You're not just missing a person, you're detoxing from their presence. No wonder it feels like tremors instead of closure. You think about all the people you've loved who didn't fit anymore. The friend who felt like a sibling until resentment crept in. The partner who once made your world bloom, then slowly dimmed its light. Love didn't vanish. It just stopped being compatible with peace. That's the part people forget. Love can stay pure even as paths diverge. Scientists still debate whether long-term love is sustained by similarity or by mutual growth. Some say stability breeds longevity. Others argue constant evolution keeps the spark alive. But when only one person keeps growing, love becomes imbalance. You start shrinking yourself just to stay connected. That's not love, it's slow erasure. There's a mainstream concept called ambivalent attachment, when affection and pain coexist. You want to stay for the warmth, but leaving is the only way to stop burning. It's not weakness to walk away, it's wisdom. Your nervous system knows when it's time to stop rewriting the same ending. You breathe in, remembering that whisper about stardust. Even stars separate. Binary systems drift apart when gravity weakens or mass changes. They don't hate each other. They just no longer orbit harmoniously. Their distance doesn't erase their light. It lets both shine without collision. You think of how the world romanticizes endurance, as if staying equals virtue. But love isn't measured by duration. It's measured by honesty. Sometimes the truest "I love you" is the one said while closing the door softly behind you. There's a fringe philosophical debate about whether love is possession or witnessing. The wiser argument says love is seeing clearly, allowing someone to be fully themselves, even if it means you can't stay beside them. Possession suffocates. Witnessing liberates. You exhale slowly. Letting go doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop negotiating with pain. It means you let memory keep its dignity instead of forcing the present to pretend. It's not loss, it's preservation. Here's a mainstream fact to soothe the ache. After heartbreak, the brain gradually rewires, reducing activity in the attachment centers. In time, love becomes less of a craving and more of a quiet gratitude. The person stops being a wound and becomes a chapter. You smile faintly in the dark. Maybe tonight, you'll finally stop rehearsing the goodbye that already happened. You'll let the echo fade without chasing it. You'll realize love doesn't end. It just changes shape. So as the hum of the night folds around you, whisper thank you, not for the pain, but for the proof that your heart still works. that it's capable of both holding and releasing. Because loving and letting go aren't opposites. They're the same act, seen from different distances. You die twice, once when you stop breathing, and once when your name is spoken for the last time. The arithmetic of existence, why memory is the second heartbeat. You've probably heard the phrase before, but lying here in the hush of night, it feels different. It's not morbid, it's mathematical. You die the first time when your lungs give up. The second comes quietly, later, when no one remembers the sound of your laugh or how your handwriting looped across paper. The second death is erasure, gentle but complete. You breathe slower, aware of how temporary the air feels when you think of it like that. Scientists still argue whether consciousness persists after death. Mainstream neuroscience says no. Thoughts end when neurons do. But fringe theorists argue about quantum consciousness, energy patterns that never fully disappear. Maybe memory is energy too, still moving somewhere, even after the living forget. Here's a quirky tidbit. There's a word in Spanish, sobremesa, for the time you spend at the table after a meal, just talking, remembering. Anthropologists say that's how immortality works, not in marble statues or history books, but in lingering conversations. The dead live a little longer every time their name is spoken over coffee. You think about who you still carry with you, the friend you still quote, the grandparent whose phrases slip into your sentences, the mentor whose advice echoes in your choices. They're gone, yes, but they still move subtly through you. Ghosts woven into gestures. Scientists still debate whether memory lives only in the brain or also in the body. Trauma proves it does. Maybe love does too. You remember that whisper about stardust. The elements in your bones are older than grief. Calcium forged in supernovas, carbon born before the earth cooled. You can't really die in any absolute sense. Your atoms are already queued for recycling. In a few million years, some of them might be part of a river or a poem or another heartbeat. Still, the idea of being forgotten stings. It's human to crave legacy, to want proof that you mattered, that your brief flicker left a dent in the dark. But here's the quiet twist. You already have. Every kindness, every joke, every late-night conversation, those ripple outward, shaping people who'll never know your name. Legacy isn't memory, it's momentum. There's a fringe philosophical argument that immortality isn't about living forever, but about being worth remembering. Yet scientists point out that the odds of universal remembrance are nearly zero. Statistically, we'll all be forgotten. But emotionally, that's irrelevant. Meaning was never about magnitude, it was about connection. You exhale softly. Maybe the goal isn't to avoid the second death, it's to make peace with it. To live in such a way that even when your name disappears, the warmth you sparked keeps glowing somewhere, faint but steady. Here's a mainstream truth that feels like a lullaby. Grief doesn't end, it just changes form. Eventually, remembering hurts less than forgetting. Love becomes a memory, and memory becomes the afterlife we can actually prove. You close your eyes, picturing the chain of lives you're part of. Every person who touched you, every soul you've quietly shaped in return. You're not a lone flame. You're part of an ongoing constellation. So tonight, as sleep folds over you, let go of the fear of being forgotten. Speak softly to those who've gone. Thank those who still walk beside you. And trust that when your name finally fades, the echo will remain in someone's heartbeat, maybe even in stardust. You die twice, yes, but life is everything that happens in between. And you, right now, are still in the middle of the miracle. So now, as the echoes of these lessons fade into the hum of your room, breathe deeper. The stories, the stings, the small awakenings, they were never meant to harden you, only to soften what's real. Picture yourself floating among those quiet stars we kept mentioning, each one pulsing like a heartbeat you've already survived. The world is gentler in the dark, and so are you. Let the noise of becoming rest, let memory blur into warmth, and let your pulse settle into peace. You made it here, that's enough. Sleep, soft and steady. Sweet dreams.